What's up, y'all? It's everybody's favorite Unk, and I'm back with another review. Today we have something very cool, a figure that I've been waiting for a while to get my hands on, and that is the G.I. Joe Classified Series Sergeant Slaughter. Now, I'll tell you right off the bat, I was not really on the hunt for this figure. This was one that I was going to get down the line. I always wanted a Sergeant Slaughter for my collection, but I was honestly leaning more towards a Mattel WWE Elite Sergeant Slaughter. Also, as a wrestling fan, Sergeant Slaughter is just one of those characters that you have to have in your collection. He's one of the most iconic faces in all of pop culture, and I think that this is going to do just fine instead of getting a WWE Mattel version of Sergeant Slaughter. But the fact that I saw this one in the wild, I went to GameStop with my brother the other day, and on a whim I saw it and said, you know what, I've got to get this one. And it's one of those figures that if you see it in the wild, it's kind of like spotting a shiny Pokemon or something. I was very excited when I saw it, and I couldn't help myself. I will say before we get too far into it that this figure is at a $33.99 price point at retail. That's what it was at the GameStop I got it at. That's just a bit more than most G.I. Joe figures. And I'll tell you off bat, is it worth the price increase over the other Joe figures? I'm not sure. That's for you to decide. For me, it is because I want this character. If I'm being objective, I'm going to say I don't think so, but it's a great figure. It does some really good things, and there's also some things that aren't so good about it as well. So let's just get right into it. Now, getting into the box, this is the first plastic-free G.I. Joe that I have in my collection, and I have to say, I enjoy the artwork on the plastic-free packaging a lot more than I do on the window packaging I've seen. You've got multiple different renders of Sergeant Slaughter on here. You've got the cartoon version or the animated series version down there on the right. You've got a comic book version saying Yo Joe up there in the right hand corner. You also have a render of the figure in the left hand corner. You've got a hand holding the figure, and you have some sort of it looks like 3D image of Sergeant Slaughter up there in the top left corner, as well as a nice stylized version of him in the middle. This art's pretty freaking cool, man. It's a lot better than most of the windowed packaging that I've seen on the Joes. If you go to the right panel, you've got Sergeant Slaughter with his signature menacing frown. You've got the reflection of the fighter jets in his glasses, which looks really cool. And if you go to the back panel, you have a picture of the figure holding his gun, and you have a picture of the figure with all of the accessories around it. You go to the left panel, and you've got the number 53, which is his number in the series. And yeah, man, honestly, when it comes to plastic-free packaging, I really dig this Sergeant Slaughter. Honestly, it would look really cool autographed by Sergeant Slaughter himself. I think that'd be awesome. So with that being said, let's get this thing out of the box, maggots, and see what we're working with. All right, now when it comes to the accessories, you do have a pretty good spread with this Sergeant Slaughter figure. You get his iconic brown leather hat. You have multiple hands, which is rare for G.I. Joe figures. And when you're talking about that $34 price point, that is cool to have. The one thing I will say about a lot of these multiple hands is that when you have this many sets of hands, not having any hands with vertical hinges on them is a little disappointing to me. Not the biggest deal, but all of them have horizontal hinges, which isn't going to be a deal breaker, but it's one of those things where it's like if you have all these hands, you might as well make some of the hinges vertical. You also get his gun, and you get a clip to go inside of his gun as well. You also get a scope for his gun as well. You get those signature Sarge aviators that actually look pretty good. You get the whistle that goes around his neck. The one complaint I have about the whistle is that I wish that it was an actual piece of rope instead of a plastic band holding it together. I think that would make it look a lot better. And you get his little scepter or whatever it is that he holds in his hand. Forgive me if I'm wrong. You get a miniature Sergeant Slaughter figure, which is really awesome to round it out. And I think that's a nice little cherry on top of the accessories. So a good spread of accessories for old Sarge. Now let's take a look at articulation. For the head, it does go all the way around 360. He can also look down pretty well. And he does look up quite a bit. That's very good for that hinged ball peg, I believe it is. That is some good range on the head. For the arms, they do go up a full 90 degrees, and it looks pretty good. You get a double jointed elbow, looking real buff. He does have a bicep swivel as well. I did not do his bicep swivel, but that is customary with Joe's. He does have butterfly joints, but they are very, very limited, and honestly, they just don't work at all, which is very disappointing, especially for old Sarge here. For the torso, he leans forward about that much. He leans back a fair amount, which is customary. For the waist swivel and just the waist pivot in general, he has a very wide range of motion, which is really, really good. You can get him in a lot of dynamic poses. And that's one thing I love about the Joes. They're so articulated. They articulate very well. For the legs, he can do the full splits. You've got yourself a thigh swivel that goes a full 360 degrees. He's got double jointed knees, of course, the pinless double jointed knees. He does have a calf swivel as well. The ankle articulation is your standard for your Joes. You get a nice pivot and you also get a forward and back that is pretty steep. One thing I will say for certain poses, and especially for your kneeling pose where they're kneeling down and shooting their gun, I would like some ankle articulation. A lot of people say that ankle articulation is unnecessary, but I think it just adds an extra level of nuance to posing, and that's something that I wish that the Joes would embrace, because as far as I'm concerned, for just your standard articulation on a 6-inch figure, G.I. Joes are very solid, but if they had little things like ankle articulation and butterfly joints that actually worked, then that would be awesome. Well, it's not like you're gonna be posing around crazy, but man, why include the butterfly joints if they just don't work? They break up the sculpt and they just don't work. Now let's get into the aesthetic on this guy. Let me tell you, man, Sarge looks pretty damn good. The likeness on his face is awesome. The sunglasses are done very well. The hat is good enough. The gun looks great, but there's little teeny problems with some of the paint apps on this figure, especially when it comes to that torso piece. It looks like the torso piece is molded black plastic, and they painted that kind of tan peach color over for his skin to match on his tank top, and there's a lot of like black bleed through on there. It's just not done very well. It looks like somebody just slapped it on, and honestly there's parts of the paint job on my figure at least that look like a bad custom. Honestly, this is just some really bad QC for a $35, $34, $33.99, whatever you want to call it, figure. Despite the fact that I'm very excited to get a Sergeant Slaughter in my hands, I'm disappointed that they're going to charge a premium price for this figure and not have the QC that is up to snuff with most $35 action figures. And honestly, saying that out of my mouth makes me realize that most $35 action figures these days do not care that much about QC, which is really disappointing. But other than that, this guy looks awesome. He looks exactly like the cartoon version, the G.I. Joe version of Sergeant Slaughter. I also like the fact that it is a young Sarge face. It's a younger version of Sergeant Slaughter, which is really, really cool. And this figure is just big and menacing. And you'll see later when I do some comparisons to other figures that he looks very large and menacing, like Sergeant Slaughter would compared to some of the other Joe characters and other action figure lines in general. Now, getting more into the aesthetic and also the accessories, there are a few things that I wish that they would have done with this figure. I really wish that they would have added a way to attach the gun to him and also the scepter. Now, I know that that may not be true to the source material, but hear me out on this one. And maybe this is just me talking crazy because I'm not a Joe purist. I really feel like they should make these accessories attachable to Sarge, because it seems like it's customary in the G.I. Joe line to be able to put every single weapon that comes with the figure onto their body somehow. I wish there was some type of like holster, like a little, maybe a shoulder strap that you could put the machine gun in, and the scepter, maybe there was something you could peg it off of his waist on. Like I said, I know that wouldn't be true to the source material, but it would just be cool to have. Another thing that would be awesome to have is an additional head sculpt, especially for the price point. It'd be great to have a head sculpt with that cigar sticking out of the mouth, with him with that smug look on his face. I mean, dude, if any customizers are listening to this right now, that would be amazing. I'm sure you can make money hand over fist if you pump some of those out. So, custom head sculpts, let's get it done. But regardless of that, it is really, really cool to have this figure in your hands. It just feels really fun to play with and pose around. That's just one of those nitpicks that I have. And, you know, call me crazy, I just wish you could attach the accessories to this guy. One issue I did have with Articulation was the ankle articulation was a tidbit loose. But that didn't affect posing in any way drastically, but it was a tidbit loose out of the box. And now for some size comparisons with old Sarge. First we have the G.I. Joe Classified Series Outback, and we also have the Action Force Female Series 3 Steel Brigade. And honestly, he looks really good posed up with these figures. I like how he's towering over both figures, and Outback is honestly a little bit shorter than I thought that he was, but he does scale awesome to the rest of the Joe line and to the Action Force figures as well. Now here he is posed up against Stone Cold Steve Austin, the Texas Rattlesnake, one of the greatest wrestling superstars of all time, and against the Amazing Fantasy Spider-Man, one of the best Marvel legends of last year. I think he scales great to these lines as well. Like I said, don't have that WWE Elite Sergeant Slaughter, but he does scale pretty well to WWE figures. I believe he probably would have been about the same height as the Elite Stone Cold, so that seems to be good to me. And here he is against the SH Figure Arts Imperfect Cell and the SH Figure Arts Sasuke, and I just had to throw both of these figures in there because they're awesome. That SH Figure Arts Imperfect Cell is amazing. Here's to hoping that Tamashii Nations gives us a second form cell and maybe even a Perfect Cell re-release this year, but that's just me having wishful thinking. And for final thoughts on old Sergeant Slaughter, man, let me tell you, I was so excited to get this figure, and I think that I made the right choice. Although it is a bit pricey compared to other Joes, he's just such an iconic character. Sergeant Slaughter to me is, you know, he's like the Hulk Hogan of the G.I. Joe Classified line. You're never going to get tired of getting him. You're always going to want more. And he's never going to die. It's like, you know, just like Hogan can never be canceled, Sergeant Slaughter could shoot someone on live television and I think people would still love the man. So for that reason alone, this figure is worth the pickup. The sculpt is honestly the best thing about this Sarge. I love how he towers over a lot of the other Joe figures. I don't believe this body is reused. I think the bottom, the legs are reused, but I believe the upper body is an original mold, and it's just so cool, man. He stands out so much next to the other Joes. And of course, he has that great kit bash ability with the hole in his back, and you can just use all types of other accessories from other figures you have to make this guy stand out. The negatives are going to be the paint apps and the QC issues. For $35, there's no reason that there should be this many QC issues with the paint and kind of the loose legs and whatnot. You can't really peg anything in on him as far as his accessories, and the butterfly joints are useless. There is no point of putting butterfly joints on a figure like this if they're not going to work. It's just going to break up the sculpt. You honestly could have just got rid of the butterfly joints and made old Sergeant Slaughter look a lot more buff and menacing. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and give this guy a final grade of a 7.5. I think that he is well worth being in any collection, especially if you are a person that collects G.I. Joe or Action Force figures. He's one of those ones that's hard to find in the wild, at least where I'm at. You know, I think that it's pretty much a nationwide thing that there's a lot of Recondos and Outbacks and Bazookas that are going on sale right now. A lot of people, like the Bats are on sale for $16 at the Target near me right now. The last wave of Joes is very easy to find right now, but this is one of those ones that you never see. It kind of reminds me of some of those Marvel retro carded figures that are just so hard to find. So if you do see this one in stores, definitely pick him up, because when you have him in your hands next to any of the other Joes, he is a special figure and he does stand out. But I do think that Hasbro could have done a lot more things to make this figure even more special. That being said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I just want to remind you guys, I am not an expert when it comes to Joes at all. I actually just started collecting them recently, but I have fallen in love with them, and I really do enjoy a lot of their releases. As far as Hasbro is concerned, I think that the Joes are their strongest line, and I think that they're very, very close to making the Joes worth that $27 price point. And even the Sergeant Slaughter is close to being worth that $35 price point, but they're just a few things they need to tweak. But anyway, like I said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe and put on that notification bell so you never miss a video from me. And until next time, peace.